The thing about running your mouth is that sometimes the universe actually dares you to prove it. I didn't mean for the whole locker room to hear me, but I had said it loud, proud, and stupid. I could turn the captain gay if I wanted. And like some scene out of a teen movie gone terribly wrong, the room had gone silent just as he walked in. That's when he smiled. Not a scowl. Not a laugh, just that slow, dangerous smile of someone who knows he owns the room. "Try me," he said, and the ground nearly swallowed me whole. Now, before you assume I was some kind of mastermind plotting seduction, let me clear this up. I was just a 17-year-old idiot who had never once in his life been able to keep his sarcasm to himself. My name's Evan. I was the guy you'd find in the art room, not the gym. I wrote snarky articles for the school newspaper, doodled in the margins of my math homework, and survived high school by staying in the background. But apparently my mouth had different plans. His name was Jason Miller, quarterback, captain, poster boy for every Friday night football game our town in Ohio lived for. He wasn't just popular, was a symbol. The kind of guy who shook hands with the mayor during halftime ceremonies and still had time to ace chemistry. Girls practically tripped over themselves for him. And now, thanks to my slip of the tongue, he was looking right at me like I was some sort of dare. I wanted to disappear. But disappearing wasn't an option when your entire senior year suddenly revolved around a single, reckless sentence. The next day, it didn't stop. Whispers in the cafeteria. Raised eyebrows in the hallway. A few guys on the team clapping Jason on the back, joking about his new boyfriend. And me? I tried to keep my head down, hoping maybe it would all blow over. Except Jason didn't let it. He cornered me after lunch, leaning casually against my locker like he owned that, too. "So," he said, voice low enough for only me to hear, "when's the magic supposed to happen? Should I start buying rainbow flags, or do we take this slow?" I stared at him, at the smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth, at the way he was clearly enjoying this more than any sane person should. "It was a joke," I muttered. "Forget about it." But Jason wasn't in the business of forgetting. He tilted his head, studying me like I was a puzzle worth solving. "Nah," he said. "I think I want to see what happens." And just like that, my life stopped being normal. At first, I thought he was mocking me. Showing up at the art room during free period, pretending to admire my sketches. Sitting next to me in English instead of his usual seat in the back with the other jocks. Asking if I wanted to hang out after practice like that was a thing we did. But then it got complicated. Because beneath the teasing, beneath the smug little challenges, there were moments, quiet ones, where I caught him looking at me like he actually meant it. Like maybe he wasn't just playing a game. One Friday night, after a game we won by a landslide, he found me leaning against the bleachers while the crowd scattered. The field lights buzzed overhead, casting a glow that made everything feel surreal. He was still in his uniform, sweat on his skin, adrenaline still burning in his eyes. "You didn't cheer," he said, walking toward me. "I don't cheer," I replied. "Maybe you should. Maybe you should stop bothering me." He laughed then, that low, genuine laugh that made my chest ache in ways I wasn't prepared for. "You're terrible at lying," he said. And then softer, "But I like that about you." The world tilted, because suddenly this wasn't just about me running my mouth. It wasn't about proving something or surviving the fallout of a joke gone wrong. It was about the way his voice dipped when he said it. The way his eyes lingered like he was afraid to look away. And for the first time, I wondered if maybe, just maybe, this whole mess had opened a door neither of us had expected. But nothing in high school stays private for long. By Monday, the rumors had teeth. People asked if Jason was serious. If I was. Girls shot me looks that could have burned holes in my skin. The guys on the team weren't cruel, not outright, but the jokes cut deeper than they probably realized. Jason didn't flinch. He walked beside me in the hallway, shoulders brushing, like he didn't care who saw. He sat across from me in the cafeteria and stole fries from my tray. He made it impossible to tell myself it was all a game. Still, I couldn't shake the fear. What if it was just another challenge? What if, at the end of this, I was nothing but a punchline? And yet, when he leaned close during study hall, his breath warm against my ear, and whispered, "I don't think I'm pretending anymore," my heart nearly stopped. That night, I lay awake replaying every moment, every word, every smile. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to. but believing meant risking everything, the fragile balance I'd managed to keep, the safety of being invisible. And I wasn't sure I was brave enough for that. But Jason Miller? He was never afraid of the spotlight. And maybe, just maybe, he was ready to pull me into it with him. Jason had a way of making everything feel like a dare. The way he looked at me, the way he brushed past me in the hall, the way his hand would linger a fraction longer than necessary when he handed back my pen in class. None of it was innocent. None of it was accidental. And yet, the more it happened, the harder it became to tell myself I wasn't affected. God help me, The weekend after his little whisper in study hall, I tried to avoid him. I buried myself in sketching, in writing, in anything that would keep me away from the idea of Jason Miller and whatever game he thought he was playing. But avoidance is a useless strategy when your opponent is the most determined guy on the football team. By Saturday evening, there was a knock on my front door. My mom answered before I could even sprint downstairs. "Oh, Jason," she said, her voice warm, surprised. "Evan didn't tell me you were coming over." Of course I hadn't. I hadn't even known. Jason stood there in a hoodie and jeans, hands shoved into his pockets, that same damn grin tugging at his mouth. "Hey, Mrs. Clark, is Evan around?" I nearly died on the stairs. "Mom, I'll handle it," I said quickly, slipping past her. "Dinner's in an hour," she called after me, clearly thrilled that the golden boy of the town had just shown up at our door. I glared at him the second we stepped outside. "What are you doing here?" "Relax," he said. "I figured we could hang out, off school grounds, where you don't have to pretend you don't like me." I froze. Don't finish that sentence." He cut me off. "You're bad at lying, remember?" And just like that, I was trapped. We ended up walking to the park, the autumn air crisp around us, leaves crunching under our sneakers. It should have been awkward, but Jason filled the silence like he always did with stories about practice, about his teammates, about the time coach accidentally tripped over a Gatorade cooler. He was easy, effortless, and against my better judgment I found myself laughing. Then he looked at me, really looked, his smile fading into something quieter. "You're different, you know that?" I rolled my eyes. "That's the kind of thing people say before they dump you." He chuckled. "Not dumping you, just noticing." "Noticing what?" "That you don't treat me like I'm some big deal." "Because you're not," I said, though my voice was softer than I intended. "Exactly." His eyes held mine, steady, searching. "And I like that." Something in my chest cracked open. And for the first time, I wondered what it would be like to stop running, to let myself fall into this dangerous, impossible thing. By Monday, it was worse, or better, depending on how you looked at it. Jason didn't hide. He walked beside me in the halls, sat with me in the cafeteria, even leaned over my desk in class like it was the most natural thing in the world. People noticed. They whispered. Some laughed. A few sneered. But Jason, he thrived on it. He had this infuriating way of daring the world to question him. And no one really did, not out loud, anyway. Except me. "Why are you doing this?" I demanded one afternoon, cornering him behind the bleachers after practice. He shrugged. "Because I want to." "That's not an answer." "Sure it is." He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell the sweat and soap on his skin, close enough that my pulse went wild. "I like being around you. Isn't that enough?" I wanted to say no. I wanted to tell him this was reckless, dangerous, impossible. But the truth was sitting heavy in my chest. Undeniable. I liked being around him too. Of course, high school doesn't let things slide. By the end of the week, the rumors had evolved from whispers to full-blown theories. Some said Jason was experimenting. Some said I had blackmail on him. Some just laughed, because what else was there to do when the captain of the football team started hanging out with the artsy nobody? I thought Jason would snap, that the weight of it would finally push him back into his golden boy lane. But instead, he doubled down. Friday night, after another game, he found me again. The stadium was emptying, the lights dimming, the air filled with the distant hum of traffic. He was still in his uniform, helmet under one arm, sweat dripping down his neck. "You coming to the after party?" he asked. I snorted. "Yeah, because I'd fit right in with your drunk teammates." "Who cares about them?" he said, stepping closer. His eyes caught mine, and suddenly the noise of the world faded. "I just want you there." My throat went dry. Why? Because I want you with me. The words hit harder than I was ready for. And before I could come up with a sarcastic comeback, before I could shield myself with humor, Jason leaned down so close I could feel the heat of him, the weight of his presence. Don't overthink it, Evan, he whispered. Just be here, with me. And for one reckless moment, I wanted nothing more than to say yes. But life has a way of testing you when you least expect it. The next week, the pushback came harder. A group of guys in the locker room made some crude joke about me training Jason, about him switching teams. It wasn't said to my face, but I heard it. And Jason heard it too. He snapped. 1 second he was pulling his shirt over his head. The next he had the guy pinned against the lockers, eyes blazing. Say that again, Jason growled, his voice low, dangerous. The room went silent. No one moved. No one dared. And then Jason let go, storming out without another word. I found him later, sitting alone on the bleachers in the dark. You didn't have to do that, I said softly. Yes, I did, he muttered. They don't get to talk about you like that. My chest ached. Jason, he looked at me then, and there was no smirk, no challenge, no game. Just raw, unguarded truth. I don't care what they think. I care about you. And that was it. That was the moment everything shifted. Because for the first time, I believed him. The problem with moments of truth is that they don't stay moments. They grow. They breathe. They push themselves into every corner of your life until you either face them or drown under their weight. After that night on the bleachers, I couldn't unhear Jason's words. Care about you. He'd said it like it was simple, like the world wouldn't tear it apart, like my heart wasn't already sprinting headfirst into disaster. And disaster was inevitable because this was high school in a small Ohio town, and nothing spread faster than a story that didn't fit the mold. Jason didn't back down. If anything, he leaned harder into whatever this thing between us was becoming. He walked with me, sat with me, looked at me like no one else was in the room. And the more he did it, the harder it became to convince myself it was all some elaborate game. But I still couldn't let myself fall. Not fully, because I knew what came with it. The whispers, the stares, the weight of everyone else's expectations pressing down until you couldn't breathe. Started at home. My mom noticed first. The way Jason dropped by after practice, the way his truck idled in our driveway too often for it to be casual. At first, she smiled, thrilled that her son was suddenly friends with the golden boy of the town. But moms know. They always do. One night, she knocked on my bedroom door after Jason left. You and Jason, she said carefully, her voice soft. Are you two close? I froze, my sketchbook open in my lap, my pencil hanging useless between my fingers. We're friends, I said too quickly. Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't push. She just nodded and kissed the top of my head. Be careful, honey, she whispered, and somehow that was worse than if she had yelled. The school, it was worse. The guys on the team had quieted down after Jason's outburst in the locker room, but silence wasn't the same as acceptance. I saw the way they looked at him, and me, like we were breaking some unspoken rule they didn't have the guts to say out loud. One afternoon, as I was pulling books from my locker, a voice muttered behind me. What did you do to him, Clark? Slip something in his drink? No way Miller actually wants you. I turned, heart pounding, but Jason was already there. Say that again, he said, his voice cold, sharp as steel. The guy, one of his own teammates, backed down immediately, muttering something under his breath before walking away. Jason slammed my locker shut for me. Don't listen to them. But I did. Every word, every whisper. They burrowed under my skin and festered until I couldn't tell if the fear was mine or theirs. The breaking point came at the worst possible time. The homecoming dance. Jason asked me to go with him. Not as a joke, not as a dare. He asked me with that quiet determination that meant he wasn't taking no for an answer. I laughed at first, shaking my head. You're insane. Do you want to start a riot? Maybe, he said, grinning. But I want to go with you. I told him no, over and over, until the night of the dance came, and I found myself sitting on my bed, staring at my reflection in the dark window, wishing I'd been braver. That's when my phone buzzed. Look outside. I did. And there he was, Jason Miller, standing in my driveway in a black suit and tie, holding a single crooked flower he'd probably stolen from his mom's garden. His truck idled behind him, headlights glowing like a spotlight. I opened the window. "Are you insane?" "Probably," he called back. "But I'm not going in there without you." My heart nearly exploded. I went. The dance was a blur of lights and music and stares that burned holes through me. Jason didn't care. He held my hand when we walked in. He danced with me like no one else was in the room. He looked at me like I was the only person who mattered, and for one perfect night, I let myself believe it was true. But perfection doesn't last. Halfway through the night, one of his teammates, half drunk, fully bitter, shoved past us on the dance floor. "You're a joke, Miller," he spat. "You're throwing it all away for him?" The music faltered. The crowd froze. Jason's jaw clenched, his hand tightening around mine. "Say that again." The guy laughed. "Everyone's thinking it. You're pathetic." And before I could stop him, before I could even process, Jason swung. The punch landed squarely, the room erupting into chaos. Teachers rushed in, kids screamed, the music cut off. And in the middle of it all, Jason stood breathing hard, blood on his knuckles, fury burning in his eyes. They pulled him away. They suspended him. And just like that, the fragile world we'd built collapsed. I didn't see him for a week. Not at school, not at practice, not outside my window. It was like he'd vanished, swallowed up by the fallout. And the silence killed me. Because without him, I realized something terrifying. I didn't just like Jason Miller. I needed him. When he finally showed up again, it was late. I was in bed, staring at the ceiling, when pebbles hit my window. Classic. Cliché. Perfect. I opened it, and there he was, bruised knuckles and tired eyes, looking up at me like he was afraid I'd send him away. "I'm sorry," he whispered. I shook my head. "You're an idiot." "Yeah," he said, smiling softly. "But I'm your idiot." And in that moment, despite everything, the whispers, the fear, the chaos, I knew I was already his. Silence has a way of magnifying everything you're afraid to admit. For a week after the homecoming chaos, that silence filled every corner of my life. Teachers didn't mention Jason's name, though everyone whispered about him in hallways. My mom didn't ask questions, though she looked at me with that knowing gaze only mothers have. And me? I carried the weight of it, Almy, fear, my longing, my anger at the way the world seemed ready to crucify us for something as simple as holding hands. But when Jason showed up at my window that night, bruised and exhausted and still smiling like I was worth every ounce of trouble, I realized silence wasn't going to win. The next morning, he walked into school beside me. No hesitation, no apology. He laced his fingers with mine, right there in the middle of the hallway where everyone could see. The world stopped, gasps, whispers, a few cruel laughs. But no one said a word loud enough for Jason to hear, because Jason Miller didn't flinch. He held his head high, his grip firm, his presence radiating the kind of defiance only he could pull off. "Are you insane?" I whispered through clenched teeth as we walked. "Probably," he said, that familiar smirk tugging at his lips. "But it feels good, doesn't it?" And God help me, it did. Of course, not everyone saw it that way. By lunch, the principal's office had called us in. "Mr. Miller, Mr. Clark." Principal Evans folded her hands on the desk, her expression tight. "You've both become a distraction." Jason leaned back in his chair, utterly unbothered. "So suspend us for holding hands, then. Go ahead." Her lips pressed tighter. "That's not what I said. It's what you meant." I held my breath, waiting for the hammer to fall. But it didn't. Not that day. Instead, she gave us both the kind of lecture that sounded less about rules and more about appearances. And as much as it burned, I realized something important. They couldn't actually stop us. Not unless we let them. The real storm came at home. Jason's dad was a former athlete, the kind of man who lived for Friday night lights and college scouts. The fight at homecoming had already pushed him over the edge. Our relationship, it was the breaking point. Jason told me about it later, voice quiet, jaw tight. He said, "I'm throwing my life away, that no one will take me seriously, that I'm not his son anymore if this is who I am." The words lodged in my throat like glass. "Jason," he shook his head, "I don't care. Not if it means pretending to be something I'm not." But I could see the crack in his armor, the weight of that rejection digging deep. And I hated his father for it. My mom, on the other hand, surprised me. She sat me down one night, her hands warm over mine. "I know you're scared," she said gently, "but I see the way he looks at you, the way you look at him. Don't let fear take that away from you." And for the first time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, weren't alone. The weeks that followed weren't easy. The whispers never stopped. Some friends drifted away. Some teachers watched us with thinly veiled disapproval. But Jason never let go of my hand. Not once. We fought, of course. About my hesitation. About his recklessness. About whether this fragile, impossible thing between us could survive the pressure. One night, after a particularly brutal argument, I found myself yelling, "What if you wake up one day and realize I wasn't worth it?" He stared at me, breathing hard, his chest rising and falling like he'd just run a mile. And then, softer than I'd ever heard him, he said, "Then I'd still be glad I tried. Because you're the only thing that feels real to me." The fight died right there. Because how do you argue with the truth? The season ended with a loss that should have devastated him. But when the final whistle blew and the crowd groaned, Jason didn't look at the scoreboard. He looked at me, and in front of everyone, his team, his coach, the entire town, walked off the field, helmet under his arm, sweat still dripping down his face, and kissed me. It wasn't long. It wasn't polished. But it was enough. Enough to silence the whispers. Enough to ignite the stares. Enough to make the world tilt on its axis. I thought I'd panic. I thought I'd crumble under the weight of it. But instead, for the first time, I felt free. The fallout came fast and brutal. Parents complained. The school board called emergency meetings. Some people rallied for Jason. Others wanted him benched, punished, erased. But Jason didn't bend. And slowly, painfully, the noise began to fade. Because the truth was simple. No one could change what had already happened. No one could take back what we had chosen. The night before graduation, we sat on the hood of his truck, parked on the edge of town where the stars burned bright. The air was warm, the world quiet. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Jason leaned back on his elbows, gazing at the sky. "College, football, art school, whatever comes next. Doesn't matter." He turned his head toward me, his smile soft, real. "As long as you're there." My chest tightened, the fear and the hope warring inside me. "And if it's hard? If people don't accept it? Then we fight." He reached for my hand, lacing our fingers together. "We've already started, haven't we?" I looked at him, the boy who had turned my world upside down with a single dare. The boy who refused to let fear win, and for once, I didn't overthink it. I leaned in and kissed him, the stars above us spinning, the future wide open. It wasn't a perfect ending. Life never is. But it was ours. And somehow that was enough. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.